What sort of man is this, that the winds and the sea obey him? My dear friends, we are our own worst enemy in our short existence on this side of eternity, insofar as we mess up what we could claim as our right, peace within. Very few navigate the oceans of life knowing how to maintain inner peace. And alas, this is not just a problem of those outside the faith. It's becoming increasingly those also of the family of faith itself. Turbulence, confusion, a large number of unneeded worries, as though the world and the church depended on us. Actually, they don't. We are, in the last resort, responsible for one thing only, that over which we have control, that which lies within the parameters of our own being. And in that being, we try our best to do what the Lord wants us to do, to adjust what comes our way. But there's no point, my friends, in losing peace because of what is outside us. We only damage ourselves. Remember that. Next time you engage or don't engage with what you don't actually have to engage with, e.g., all this stuff out there in the cybersphere. Whether it's watching a YouTube or going into someone else's blogging, it's all more of the same thing. Stuff which takes away what you have as a right, interior peace, and therefore joy in the Lord. Ask yourself, before any action, the old Latin adage, it's quid hic ad eternitatem. What this for eternity? What use? Now, I want to go back in time to a moment which actually could help you insofar as it helped me, in the context of a great saint of which we've been thinking this last weekend, St. Thomas Aquinas. Here he is. There's actually a story behind the way that came to me, and it didn't come because I was studying in the Angelicum, where he was the patron saint, along with Albert the Great. It came through a very strange situation. I happened to be, years ago, celebrating a weekday Mass in Dulique, in the church, at the parish priest's request. He was impeded. And as always, I gave a word after the Gospel. And all I did was, in the context of the Gospel, quote a Welsh author, Dylan Thomas. I just left them with this: time passes. Listen. Time passes. It's from Underwood Wood. And I went on to comment that each moment comes but once. It's passing. We sanctify it or we blotch it. And because it comes but once, let's sanctify it and not blotch it. For moments are important. They come but once. I had no idea that one good man in the congregation wasn't actually from Dulique at all, but from Ashburn, was writing down every word I was saying in his prayer book. He eventually made himself known and told me his story, and we became friends. And he came eventually and let me understand that he wasn't well, so I knew what he meant. And the Lord put him on his heart to have me have one or two things before he left this moment of time that we call life. And one of them was this, along with the document that went with it from the Vatican. So it's authentic. St. Thomas Aquinas. It's been in my oratory ever since. Eventually, a good while later, somebody came to the door. Do you know that gentleman who used to come to visit you? He's just died. Oh. So off I went to the removal at Ashburn, then following to the funeral. And what was my surprise when Father Jim Lynch, then parish priest, took out the prayer book of the good man, and in the flyleaf these words which he'd copied, and read them again years later, not knowing where they'd come from. And I thought, wow, who knows the power of a word that we might say just like that? So there's wisdom and there's power in the air. Remember that before you go into this false wisdom which is tottering the air right now. The cybersphere is full of too many words of which our brain is not made. It's a very different mode to be living in just the sound of silence, filled with a few necessary words from the book. Why? We were made for that. And what worked in the mind of the Creator works far better than what we think will work better through our forcing them. I want to stop for a moment on this saint. He could have been bishop. He refused, I think, more than once. He knew that his work was with the word, with the pen. And he also knew where to get the word. It wasn't from just complicated thought, it was from mystical knowledge as well. On more than one occasion, he is known to have had mystical contact with the Logos, and he was caught in dialogue with the Lord by his sacristan. He wanted to know whether he'd written well of him, and the Lord was giving him to understand that he'd written very well of him. And specifically on another occasion, he wanted to know whether every word he'd written on the Blessed Sacrament was correct. And he heard and was given these words, Bene scripsisti de me. You have written well of me, and specifically you have written well of the sacrament of my body. Now, as it happens, when in school, because the Catholic Church was very close to our school, while still on the brink, I used to walk in and out of the open church. Notice the open Catholic Church. And again, one is amazed at the power of a word. I wanted to know where the truth was. Now, you may not be aware of it in Ireland, but in England and Wales, these racks, the CTS racks at the end of the church, are very important locuses. They're very good, the tracts, the little pamphlets that CTS publish in Britain. And, wanting to know, I came across one or two of these pamphlets at the back. One was on St. Thomas Aquinas, and what was on the cover but that coming from the tabernacle with the Holy Ghost and those words, you have written well of the sacrament of my body. So I understood that there's actually more to Thomist thought than just a theologian. Here we have somebody who has listened and got a word and able to put it down. A logical mind, which later on in university years I was studying. Everything is put down in complete serene balance, and that's how it's done. All the elements of a question are looked at without raising the voice. One is not afraid of any element of truth, and if one is, it means that one is not free. The truth is free and frees. And the attitude that we have is wanting to know, not wanting to tell it. But then, I remember, I was also an adolescent, and I came across the story, again in the CTS pamphlet, the back of the church, St. Peter's Church, It was on the schoolboy saint. Does anyone know who it is? Dominic Savio. He was about 15 and he died of, I think, tuberculosis, whatever it was. He died in school days, but his spiritual father was the great guide of the youth, John Bosco. And he had a vision. It was this. He saw a great field, dark and dank, full of mist. He didn't know where it was, but then he saw a pontiff appearing, and in his hand a great lantern which was dispelling this dark mist. Eventually, he and John Bosco was given to understand what it meant and what it referred to. The Roman Catholic hierarchy was about to be re-erected in Britain. And that, coming from one schoolboy to another, was very powerful. What does that mean? It means that in that building where you are now, St. Peter's, you have the faith, the presence, the light, and only there. Now, that's not noisy. There was nobody there. It was only a book, and also, as it happens, a presence which I could sense in that Catholic church. Truth does not need argument, violence, aggressiveness, insults, acerbity. It needs a capacity to be taught. We are not greater than the truth. And therefore, the attitude of Thomas Aquinas would be the one to cultivate. What did he do? He would go to the tabernacle and ask for the light. Tradition has it that actually he would get so close that he would put his head right there and even sometimes open the door and put it inside until the inspiration came. Such was his love for Jesus. Theology, my friends, is done on one's knees, not in the cybersphere, not in the fumes of hot, debated argument, but the charity of which Paul speaks in the first lesson has gone long out of the window. I conclude. The Holy Father, in writing about the sacred mysteries recently, has insisted that it should never be a locus of factions and division. It is nonsense if that has become the case. Having said that, there is reason for pain, and therefore we will listen to the pain. But put the problem where it is. It's in the fact that people don't love Jesus. And there comes the problem in celebration. The presence is the presence, unchanged and unchangeable. What surrounds it is our attitude to it, and what comes out of us is our problem. I am convinced that the problem, my friend, is not in which rite, which missal, it's in the love of the heart. If the love is there, the rest will follow, as in a good monastery. If it's not there, anything will go. There is the problem. There is the rub. Let's not confuse the issues. For Jesus, my friends, is hurt in his own house, because there is no love for the one who inhabits it.